and welcome to News 5's Domestic Violence Forum, Voices for Change. Tonight we are here to bring awareness to a very serious issue. 1 in 4 women experience severe intimate partner physical violence. More than 90% of female homicide victims are killed by a man that they know. Nearly 50% of domestic violence victims in Cleveland are at high risk of homicide or severe assault. And we know that 1 in 3 domestic violence abusers in Cuyahoga County rarely spends a day behind bars. Why are we here tonight? Because of startling statistics, in-your-face stats like that we need to pay attention to. We all know that the recent murder of Aisha Frazier and her ex-husband, former judge Lance Mason, accused of her murder, sparked a movement happening in this community for people wanting to know more about domestic violence, wondering why, how could something like this happen? Tonight, we're going to dig into this issue of violence that's rooted in power, control, and feeds off the fear of victims. Let me introduce you to the people who will be helping us answer these questions tonight. First of all, we have retired Judge Ronald Adrian. He is a longtime advocate for victims of domestic violence. He organized workshops for judges on how to better protect victims in domestic violence cases, and he also advocated that offenders undergo counseling. He co-authored a book titled Ohio Domestic Violence Law. We thank you for being here with us today, Judge Adrian. Next to him, we have Alexandria Rudin. She is the senior attorney at the Legal Aid Society of Cleveland. She represents domestic violence victims. She's well-versed in protection orders and the legalities surrounding this issue. She's also a member of the Ohio Supreme Court Domestic Violence Advisory Committee. Alexandria, we thank you for your expertise this evening. Melissa Graves, the CEO of the Domestic Violence and Child Advocacy Center, fairly new to our area, but well-versed in the issue. She has devoted her career to working with vulnerable families and children. She's very passionate about increasing awareness of domestic violence in our community and also informing the community about the resources that are available at the DVCAC. And last but not least, we have Joy A. Reed with us this evening. She is a licensed professional counselor who has worked as a criminal justice professional for over 29 years. Reed has worked as a therapist, parole services supervisor, and she's going to give us some information tonight on the mind of the abuser and the cycle of abuse and what's going on. And also, why do women stay? What are some factors? Because we all have had that question at some point in time, why women stay. So I want to welcome all of you who are with me tonight here at the First Unitarian Church. Thank you for being here with us tonight. And also want to thank all of you who are watching via our Facebook page and also on our website, news5cleveland.com. Let's jump into it. Melissa, what is domestic violence?
Yeah, so I think that it's hard for people to sometimes understand what domestic violence is because we think about it in the context of what most people know relationships to be. So, you start off with mutual attraction, it gets a deeper relationship over time, there's affection, there's growing love, and there's respect. And relationships can be challenging. Sometimes they have issues, they're challenging, there's give and take required. Some are more healthy than others, and this is kind of what we think about for the context of relationships. That's not what a domestic violence relationship is. Domestic violence is the opposite of respect. Domestic violence is where a pattern of behavior where one person is systematically causing harm to their partner. And we think about it with the physical violence, some of the extreme cases that we see in the news where there's extreme injury, extreme death, and that is clearly part of the dynamic. But it's not the whole dynamic. There's verbal abuse, there's emotional abuse, there is financial abuse, there is stalking, there's sexual abuse, even within a married relationship. And so it's a pattern of abuse. And it's not arising from feelings, and it's not arising from anger or from losing control and going off on anger. This is a system of values and a system of beliefs that says one person believes that they are entitled to treat another person however they want, and however they want is inflicting severe harm and damage in order to control, manipulate, and dominate in that relationship. So that is a domestic violence relationship.
Okay.
And that abusers typically don't exhibit those behaviors toward anybody except their intimate partner. So that's why it also becomes so when you hear the community saying, I can imagine that person doing anything like that. That's part of the profile of this dynamic, is that it's intimate partner violence because that dynamic is directed toward the person with whom they're in an intimate relationship.
So we're doing some research on this. We also saw that manipulative parenting is part of an abusive relationship as well, isolating you away from people. But the parenting thing was kind of interesting to me, manipulative parenting. Alexandra, do you see that with the victims that you have represented?
I often do. I think the one thing that I've heard from another advocate that I know, Tim Bainline, he has always said that abusers are active manipulators, and they're strategic. They use the children to threaten their victims. They use the children to do things that could hurt the victims. So yeah, I see this all the time.
We know that right now with the Aisha Frazier murder, that, as I said just a few moments ago, that a lot of people are questioning, where are we on this issue? Do we only talk about this when there are high-profile cases like the Frazier murder and then it kind of goes away? Is this happening more now? We're reporting on it more because, there are more cases? Or is it the fact that the high-profile cases are giving women more confidence to speak up about what is happening?
So, do you want to answer?
No, you can do.
I'll just respond in what we see in the calls that we get to our helpline. I mean, I don't think that it's happening more than it has before. I think it's always been at epidemic levels. I think we're hearing about it more. There is more awareness of it. I also don't know that there are more victims coming forward because the dynamics that kept them silent and kept them fearful of coming forward are still very much in place. That hasn't shifted. So I think there's more community awareness, possibly with the Me Too conversation and with some of the high-profile cases. But I think it also has the effect of sometimes driving victims even further into isolation. And you may have perpetrators who are saying, you think that's what you're going to do? You think that's okay for you? There's that force that's still keeping them isolated. So we have seen an influx of calls, but not as many as I would expect or hope, because I know that there are more people out there in isolated situations.
Alexandra?
And for every high-profile victim, there have to be 50 to 100 victims that are suffering the same thing, but they are not able to get their story told. I believe that the number of clients has not necessarily increased, but the issue is more visible. And I think that's what we need to do. We keep needing to have that front and center.
When we talk about having things front and center, one of the reasons why we wanted to do this forum was to present the information, the resources. Where does Jane Doe go, who's watching us right now, at home with her 3 children, no job, just a high school education, husband has been beating her, wants to get out, but she doesn't know the first thing to do. She doesn't know a number. She doesn't even know the Domestic Violence and Child Advocacy Center exists. Where are we falling short in the community in making sure that people are aware of the resources?
So, yes, the helpline number, that's a confidential helpline number. It's 216-391-4357-HELP. We try to get that out as much as possible, and thank you for your help in getting those numbers out. But that is a really important first call. And what happens when they call that line is, number one, they're going to have somebody who believes them, who is going to affirm them and support them and start the process of safety, of looking at their situation and safety planning. There's no formula. There's no one step that works for everybody. Every situation is different. And so the helpline folks are trained really, really well and to walk through that process with the victim. But we provide comprehensive services, so the helpline is an important first call for safety planning and for resources. We run a shelter, which is the only shelter in the county dedicated specifically for victims of domestic violence. It's a confidential shelter. It's a really important resource. It's always full. We have court advocates, justice system advocacy, working in the courts to help victims walk through and know what's going to happen in that process. Trauma-informed therapy. We'll never break cycles without having therapeutic resources to deal with that trauma and to heal from that trauma. and a supervised visitation center, which I think that people do not even know exists, and it's such an important resource and such an important piece of this puzzle in having victims be safe. How many stories have we heard about exchanges of kids happening at a parking lot of a McDonald's or a restaurant or a relative's house, or that sometimes those can turn really volatile and dangerous, and having supervised visitation is really important. And then community education and prevention. You know, how do we start with young children talking about healthy relationships, talking about an expectation to be safe and respected in a relationship. And we need to start that conversation really young, because that's not what people see around them a lot of times. It's not what they experience in their lives.
Yeah, we're going to expound upon that a little later in the discussion, but Alexandria, I see you want to jump in.
I just wanted to say that I found a statistic which has fascinated me, that only 4%, and I've seen this over and over again, only 4% of abuse victims have used a shelter or hotline within the year prior to being killed by an intimate partner.
Only 4%.
And I can't imagine it's that low, but I've seen this over and over, and the different statistics seem to suggest the same number.
And why do you think this is? What are you seeing?
I have to believe they're not connecting, that they don't realize that a shelter is meant for them, a hotline can help them. So we're falling short letting people know what is out there in our community.
Well, right now we want to let you know, those of you who are watching via Facebook and on our website, 216-391-HELP. If you're in the Cleveland area, 216-391-HELP. If you're watching right now, you need help, call that number. Someone is there right now to listen to you. Nationally, we have a 1-800-799-7233. That is the National Domestic Violence Hotline, 1-800-799-7233. Help is available for you. Now, for the audience that's here at the church, if you have questions, if you have comments, we have a microphone in the center aisle. Feel free. I hear some of you saying yes and nodding your heads on a lot of things that have been said already. Feel free to get up. We want to hear your voice tonight. This is about Voices for Change, where you can inform us about what's happening in your community, or maybe you have a question for one of our panelists. We want to get your questions answered. For those of you on Facebook, please send your questions in from Facebook. We will ask your questions here in this forum tonight. You are also a part of this discussion. We have Dr. Lolita McDavid who's with us. And Dr. McDavid, what is your question or comment?
I'm Medical Director of Child Advocacy and Protection of Rainbow Babies and Children's. And several years ago, 10 to 15 years ago, the county commissioners came to us and they asked us to help put together a program for children who witness violence. Because what we know is that in 75% of cases where there's domestic violence, there are children present. And we know that boys who observe this are more likely to be violators themselves, and that girls who grow up in homes where there's domestic violence are more likely to be victims. And we really need to understand that this is not just a thing for today, it is a thing for the generations to come.
Very good comment, and something I wanted to touch on, because we are seeing, I know for a fact now, that in the schools where boys are hitting girls and saying they like it. They like it when we control them this way. They're getting this from somewhere. So here's the question, Judge Adrian. What needs to be done? What systems can be put in place? What systems are in place to educate, to help people, parents at home, in the schools? As she was saying, we're kind of dropping the ball on connecting the dots here. Where do you see we need to pick up the ball?
Well, this is an issue that requires us to teach early and often. And I think that that's one of the problems that we have. It's not a one-off. It's not something where you can come in and give one instruction and think that that's going to be good enough. It really should be interwoven into virtually all of the instruction that we get, that every opportunity that we have to make the point that everyone is entitled to respect, everyone is entitled to a safe environment, no one should live in fear. Every opportunity we have to do that in school and in every other social construct we should take. And frankly, I don't think that we do that well enough. There are too many opportunities that are missed, and there are too many times when we don't take advantage of the resources that we do have available to us to actually get the word out, which is why a forum such as this is so invaluable. Hopefully something that one or more of us says causes someone to at least examine their situation, recognize that although they may feel isolated, that there really are community resources that are available to them, that they do have the ability to access those resources and to cause their situation to improve. And unfortunately, too many times, folks look around and they think that the system or systems out here are not going to make their situation better. They're actually going to make them worse.
And where did the confidence in this system start going down? Why is that woman out there watching now, or that man saying, you know what, I see too many people getting off. It's no need for me to say anything because he or she is going to come back and try to kill me because they get a smack on the wrist and then they're back out there.
Well, in many instances, that comes from the fact that the person that they're in the abusive relationship with has caused them to believe that that's the case. They think that that person is more powerful than the system, and that no matter what they do, at the end of the day, that person can get to them.
Very key. We have a question from Facebook, Kelly.
We do. We're getting a lot of similar questions to what you're talking about. Christy asked, why do prosecutors continue to take reduced plea deals when they have evidence enough to convict? And Robin asked a similar question of, why does the system let them slide through and then get out to abuse again?
So, you know, the criminal justice system really runs on its necessity to modify case violence. It's not necessarily the perfect system. It has lots of flaws. But if every case that could be tried was tried, the system would collapse under its own weight. We don't have the resources to really engage in that kind of litigation. And so most of the time when you come together and you have evidence on one side and you have someone contesting that evidence on the other side, the two sides try to meet in the middle to find something that they both can accept as being appropriate for that circumstance. And in many instances, that may result in someone not going to jail. But then once again, going to jail is not necessarily, in every instance, the answer either for the perpetrator or for the victim. As a matter of fact, left to their own devices, what we've been able to determine in Cleveland is that approximately 70 to 80% of all of the people who actually are interfacing with the system as a victim will, at some point before the situation is resolved by way of some sort of a plea or a trial or something along that lines, decide that they don't want to continue to participate. And they have all kinds of excellent reasons why they don't want to participate. And they'll disconnect from the system. That causes all kinds of stress in that police officers who have gone to a particular location on numerous occasions only to see a victim go down to the clerk's office and bail an individual out before the officer has finished the paperwork, or a prosecutor who has helped someone get a protection order only to have the victim come in 2 or 3 days later and say, I no longer need that protection order, or a court who inquires of a victim as to whether or not that victim wants the situation to continue on to trial, only to have a victim say no. All of those people then are soured on domestic violence cases, and so domestic violence cases in many instances are not looked upon favorably by system actors. What we know is that the dynamics of domestic violence are such that the majority of victims that are in abusive relationships eventually will leave, but they leave on their own schedule and at their own pace and at their own time. And what they need from the system is a recognition that they're dealing with their own safety plan, and what they've figured out they need to do, and that when they're ready, they are. We can't impose our id on them because we think that we know better what they need than what they do.
Well, Judge, don't we do that because when we have a domestic violence affecting someone we know or in a family member, and we say, how in the world, why in the world? A lot of us were raised, you hit me one time, it's over. You know, there's no discussion. Yet, Joy, I'm going to bring you into the discussion. We know that there are women who stay in these abusive relationships, and as we're scratching our heads, as Judge Adrian said, but they've got their own thing, and it is very difficult to stand by and watch that happen.
It is difficult to stand by and watch, but it's imperative to family and friends to understand the fact that they may be staying, but they may not have a way out. We can give them telephone numbers and they can get help. But how do you protect their family? How do you protect their friends, their loved ones that are outside of that home? Because the abuser that they're dealing with could be threatening to hurt or harm that family member. So they may be afraid to leave, so it might be easier to just stay. They may not be able to see into the future that they have a future. They could have been emotionally beaten down so much that they don't see that they can survive past that relationship. And also, as a system, how are we protecting them? I have seen women through the course of my career, I've seen some stay, I've seen some go. I've seen some stay in the relationships and they're never going to leave because that's their relationship and I'll get out of it when I'm ready. But I've seen some that ended in a fatality, and maybe not with that particular person, but maybe a family member. I remember one particular case that was dear to my heart, and I'll never forget it. The gentleman had already caused her hurt, harm, and danger and almost killed her, and when he was released from prison, he went right back after her. She talked to me, and I told her, I said, you better find yourself a place and disappear. And that's the only person I've ever talked to in my career that ever listened. Till this day, I don't know where she went, but she disappeared. In between time, he had another young lady he got involved with, and I tried to explain to her, this is not the person you want to be with. She thought I was making it up. He eventually, within 6 months, he eventually killed her father, because he was trying to hurt and harm the rest of the family members, and her father was trying to protect them. So it's devastating. It's devastating to the family and the community, and when you're in an isolated situation, your family, after a while, may be tired of the situation. So how do we as a community help them? How do we help them escape? How do we protect them? Can we? Can the system?
Alexandria? Can we?
I think we have to, the one thing we need to do is listen to the survivors. One thing we have to do is look at all our civil justice system, our criminal justice system, our juvenile justice system. We have to recognize, as Dr. McDavid said, that there is an intergenerational aspect. But we also have to understand, when we heard somebody ask why they would take a plea, why the prosecutors would push a plea, sometimes victims need that perpetrator to pay support. Sometimes that victim needs that perpetrator to be involved. Sometimes that survivor can't testify. She's so traumatized. So we have to look at everything. And if we can look at all our systems, including our systems that deal with children, I think we have the ability to move forward.
But I think there's something else that needs to be said, too. Our community has, for many years, been trying to do what it can to fill in gaps in our ability to intervene in these matters, to try to connect the different parts of the system so that when someone is in an abusive situation, that they can get the help that they need. More needs to be done. But one of the things that we do is we have a fatality review committee, so that every person who is killed as a result of an intimate partner relationship, within a couple of years after that case is terminated, has that case reviewed to try to see what did we miss, what could we have done better. You know? One of the things that's been both startling and unsettling about the work of the Fatality Review Committee is that in too many instances, what we found is that the victims of these offenses were not seen by any single organization in our community before they showed up as a homicide.
And isn't that part of the problem? Because we have these victims out here, these people that are, as she's saying, and they don't have any, I'm over here being beaten, you're over there with the healing and the help, but I don't even know how to get to you. First of all, I didn't even know you were standing over there. And so that's where we're here tonight. Like, where do we, how do we know all these great things you're talking about? I never heard of a fatality. I didn't even know that existed. I'm sure a lot of people here at the church tonight, maybe they didn't know it existed. That's the problem. There's a lot of ignorance about the resources, the programs, the centers, the shelters, the telephone numbers. You're right. There is such a big gap there that people don't know. And can I go here? Do we want to know?
No.
Thank you. Who said that? Who said that?
We don't want to know. We don't want to know because it's too ugly.
Okay, excuse me, brother, 1 second. I'm going to let her come up here. Do we want to know? And this is where we have to get to tonight. Please come up and give us your comment.
Hi, my name is Rochelle Obuji. I'm a chaplain, and I'm going to tell you this. We don't want to know because it's too ugly. We don't want to know that we want to think that the abusers are in a wife-beating shirt of a different race, of a different socioeconomic, of a different education, that they can't be our judges, that they can't be our cops, that they can't be our pastors, because that would mean that we would have to rethink our reality. The truth is there's no face on crime, there's no face on abuse, and as we all know, through all of the evidence, through what's being revealed now from history within organizations like churches, looking at this situation, even with Aisha, that this was a judge. These are people who said, well, I couldn't have imagined. Well, this is what you need to do. You need to believe the intimate partner, the person who knows them best behind closed doors. And then when you do that, all abuse is not just beating someone in the face. It's financial. It's using the court system, because victims don't go over well in court. Because you know what? Scared people look crazy. Hurt people look angry. And so when you're sitting here and we're asking, what can we do? Believe the victim. And some people don't present as victims because they have the willpower to get up in many circumstances. And so why do we have to wait until someone is dead on a sidewalk before we listen? We're doing all this, but who are we really saving? It's making us feel better. But at the end of the day, we have to be there when we hear the screams, when we hear the neighbor screaming. What are we going to do when we've been conned by somebody who's used the system to manipulate it? And so now you're looking at the real victim sideways because you failed for somebody who really wasn't a victim. We have to have discernment. And I'm sorry that I'm very passionate about this.
No, we appreciate
because
that.
I'm going to tell you this.
We appreciate it. We appreciate it. No, we appreciate it. Because what she is saying, she actually speaks, I think, for a lot of people. And one key thing she said are the signs. Let's talk about the signs briefly, and I want you to stand right there. Let's talk about the signs that we should be looking for in our friends, the person you're sitting next to in church, your coworker. What are some of the signs, the red flags? She brought up another key point. It's not just when you're getting punched in the face. It may not be the black eye, but it's the verbal abuse. It's the emotional abuse. You know, it's that monitoring wherever you go, controlling you. You know, family members you can talk to, who you can't talk to. These are the types of things we don't highlight as much. And as she said, a lot of times, it's just like when kids are sexually abused. Oh, Uncle JoJo would never do that to you. You know, sometimes we have a disbelief going. So what are some of the signs that you can just give us right now? People who are watching, maybe you think, you don't know, you think you're in an unhealthy relationship. Maybe you're in an abusive relationship. The hotline.org has a great list of things right now, but what are some signs that we need to pay attention to? And I think it's important to note, it's not enough just to identify the sign. We have to speak up about what we're seeing and not be afraid to confront the person.
Mm-hmm. Some of the signs, jealousy. Mm-hmm. And I think in young girls, this is something that's cute for them. Oh, he's jealous, you know, because someone else is looking at me, but it's not cute. And as you get older, you might think this is an endearing quality, but it's not an endearing quality. Isolation. Once you're in that relationship where you outgoing before and socialize with friends, and now you're in this relationship and your family is too controlling. Your friends are too controlling. I need you to spend more time with me. So you'll look up one day and he's the only person in your life. You can't wear the clothes that you used to wear. Those were nice and cute when you were dating, but now that you're all mine, I don't need you to wear those things. Those, your finances. And it could be a financial situation where he won't work and now he's controlling your money. And she may make an excuse, oh, he's having a hard time. I need to support him. And his line will be, you're not supportive enough. I'm struggling here. And in the black community, this is a conversation, a real conversation, especially if this is a person that has a criminal background. You know how hard it is for me to get a job. You need to be more patient with me. So she's working, and but yet he's controlling her money. But she's not looking at this as a sign. She's looking at this as, I'm not being as supportive in my relationship as I should be.
Yes, your question.
Okay, well, I'll just piggyback off that a little bit. My question was, what line of questions should we be asking so we can be proactive instead of reactive? Aisha was a personal friend of mine. She was a classmate. We graduated together and all those things. So to see her out happy and smiling, you know, clearly things have happened before this had even taken place publicly. We weren't even aware. So now, what line of questioning do we have, or what's there for us to find out what's going on? I mean, I have personal concerns of members of my family, you know, with the isolation and the clothes. Oh, you can't wear that anymore, and things like that. I mean, so I'm interested in a particular line of questioning, if there's such a thing, and then is there a benchmark? If you answer two of those questions, yes, are you in trouble? Is it more? Like, where do you go from there?
Good point. Questions, what should we be asking?
Yeah, so I think it is really important to approach those relationships or those questions in a really supportive way. You know, I've noticed this about, you know, checking in. You seem like you've been kind of, you know, quieter lately. I'm a little worried about you. Kind of trying to open up those veins of conversation and maybe not coming in with a, hey, are you, you know, in an abusive relationship, but really showing concern and support. And, you know, not from a judgmental place. I think sometimes, or if somebody comes to you and is coming to you proactively to have concerns about a relationship, to believe and to affirm and to not try to give your opinion of what you think they should do. Because I think so often the advice that people want to give is, you know, well, just, you know, get strong, get your confidence up, get your courage up, and you got to leave. And I think it's important for people to understand that that is not always a safe course of action for somebody, that the most dangerous time when someone's in an abusive relationship is when they try to leave. That will trigger someone who's trying to assert control. That is the biggest trigger, is when someone tries to leave that orbit. So leaving is a very difficult thing. So I think, you know, be careful about giving advice like that could actually put them in more harm's way. but it is commenting on the things that you're noticing that are making you be concerned. You know, I'm noticing that you guys are canceling a lot of plans and not showing up for these activities. I'm noticing that, you know, when, you know, so-and-so is around, sometimes your demeanor changes and you look like you're a little bit less participant. You look kind of nervous, or you're less active in the conversation. You know, whatever it is you're noticing that's making you concerned, start there with I'm concerned and this is why.
So it's more in the approach and the tone and how you approach the person. Okay, again, those of you who are watching us on Facebook, we want your questions. Feel free to write your questions. We're going to try to get your questions answered this evening. We do have a question here at the church.
My experience with the judicial system when I would have the police come, they treated it as a landlord-tenant issue. It was my home, but my abuser lived with me and had been. This went on for 8 years. So they would come out from time to time when I had enough, and they treated it as a landlord-tenant, relationship. You'll have to evict them. And I'm thinking in the back of my head, do you know how much damage can happen in my household in 90 days? That's not an option for me. Then, to compound the problem, I worked from home. So I'm coming in and out because I have to meet customers, but I'm working from home. So my laptop, my computer, all my instruments that I need to earn money are at home. So then when I would really get fed up, I would take my laptop, I would go buy a printer, and I would hold up at a Marriott just to get some peace, because I cared at one time for this person. So I don't want to harm him, and I don't want to be harmed. I just want him out.
Yeah.
That's all. I just want him out of my home. So I ended up having to, because he was very strategic as to where the marks were on my body, from my neck to my torso. I'm clothed. You can't see that. The only person who would see it is my mom when I went home, because we have no secrets. So I just get undressed, and how'd you get that bruise? And how'd you get that bruise? So I was very determined to live through, but I had to have proof, because the police would come and just say, give him 9 days, got to put him out. I had to go to my district, take off my clothes, have her take pictures, go down to the police department and file charges. Again, not wanting him arrested because, yes, there were mental issues there, but I didn't deserve this. And she put in a warrant for his arrest. It was a misdemeanor. I'm someone that has not experienced the judicial system. I don't go to court. For what? I got a parking ticket. Maybe that's it. But so it sat there, and it just sat there. Then God sent somebody in my life, and she was like, he started to abuse her. She's like, you got to go. You got to tell the judge what's really happening. And I'm like, what do you mean? She said, you got to tell it like you tell everything else. You got to tell it. And I get in the courtroom, and the judge says, what's happening? And I explode. Immediately, I get a restraining order. That was the second time I had been down there. Same place, different results. Because I shared what was actually going on in the house. It wasn't that I was afraid to share it with somebody, but I wanted something instant. He has to go now. It can't go on. And one day ended in 8 years. So I get the restraining order. Now I'm planning. I'm like, okay, so there's a warrant, there's a restraining order, and then I go to the police station and they say, well, we don't execute restraining orders. And I'm like, are you upholding the law or not? I need you to serve this because I need this person out of my house. I'm tired of going to the hotel spending money. I didn't know a place existed for me to go to hang out. I would have brought my stuff there, but I didn't know about it. I've called to the helpline, and they were very receptive, but I didn't know that. And I'm figuring this out as I go. And so I'm like, okay. I'm like, so the person held me. He goes to jail. They come and get him. The police knock on the door. He don't answer. I said, go downstairs, unlock the door, and let him in. The police come in, they get him out. I said, great. He's got a restraining order. When he gets to court, serve him this, because he can't come back here. That's all I wanted him was out. I don't want him to come back to my house. All he had to do was come get his keys, and everything else was a police escort to get anything you needed. But I got out safe, but that was 8 years later. That was 8 years later. As far as counseling, I called 3 times because I know I need therapy. They messed up the schedule. They double scheduled. I'm like, never mind. I'll stay on the altar till I get this rectified. But I had to go to court, I believe, 10 times. And they ended up giving him 2 years probation, a $900 fine. And I believe that judge, I strongly believe that she was going to lock him up. But I said no, because that's not what he needed. That wasn't the place for him. I didn't have the hate. I just wanted him away from me. I didn't want to be harmed, but I didn't want him in jail because that wouldn't have helped his situation. And since then, it's been peaceful. Yes, I still have to get the therapy, but I'm just saying those interactions, that 8 times, I'm like, you know, people was like, there's nothing's going to happen. They're going to let him go. I'm like, over my dead body. Something has to happen because of the abuse, the verbal abuse. And then when I start talking to my neighbors, they could say, I could hear him yelling at you. And I'm thinking, why didn't you pick up the phone? Why didn't you call somebody while he was doing the yelling? Maybe if the police would have rolled up while he was yelling, they would have got rid of him then. And I wouldn't have had to treat it like a landlord-tenant relationship. So I'm glad I'm standing here. And no, I didn't plan, but I caught it. I'm like, I gotta go, because they gotta know. You gotta talk about it. You gotta say what's going on. You gotta tell your family. God will send somebody, and this person I didn't even know, to help you to get through, just to get through, so that you can breathe again. There is life on the other side. I promise you.
Thank you so much for your courage and sharing that today. Judge Adrian, I'm sure you've heard many of those types of stories, the process that she had to go through. She said 8 years of going back and forth.
For every person that agrees with the assessment that you made, grew up in a family and said, you know, you hit me once, that would be the last time you hit me. There's somebody who's been in a relationship for 20 or 30 or more years and has stayed in the relationship, dealt with all of the things that this young lady dealt with, for other reasons perhaps. You know, it might be religious, it might be economic, any kind of things that cause people to stay. There are all kinds of legitimate rationales and reasons for why folks stay. There's one thing I feel constrained to say, though. You know, we have a system that is supposed to look at each one of these situations and judge them on their individual merits. Judges try extremely hard to be impartial when they see these situations. And because a lot of the people who are classic batterers are also master manipulators, making those determinations as to who's telling the truth becomes extremely difficult for judges, which is another reason why judicial officers really don't like domestic violence cases, because in many instances the only people who were present are the perpetrator and the victim. And as somebody pointed out, when somebody is in high dudgeon, you know, extremely upset, they can come off looking as though they're the ones that are crazy, while the other person is saying, I don't know what's wrong with that person. Obviously you can just look and see that there's the problem. Mm-hmm. And so if you weren't in the situation to actually see it take place, that's one of the reasons why sometimes you get bad results in court.
I want to talk about, we talked about what we can do as a community. I know the Domestic Violence Center, you have a great program where you can tell children about what is a healthy relationship and what is an unhealthy relationship. I've witnessed that. I want to, and we're going to get to the questions here, We're dancing around this one particular area, but we're not digging into it. Those of us who are people of faith and the church, and there's this thing called pray and stay, where you go to church, we have women, men, I'm not going to just say women and men, whoever's the victim. They come to the altar. They confess, hey, I got a black eye. Hey, I've got this on my back. And the response that they're getting from their priests, their pastors, their bishops, you stay. You don't divorce. You stay. Pray about it. Give it to God. And God will take it away. How many homicides do we have that's attached to pray and stay? How many women try to get help, but our churches need to be more educated. Our clergy. I know that there's an organization, Pneuma Life Foundation, that they actually go into the church and train people as advocates so that when these people come to the altar, the other thing is that they shouldn't be made to feel bad. Here's the other thing. Well, he didn't go away. Something must be wrong between me and God. Then that compounds the negativity, the self-demeaning, the negative thoughts, and all of that. So we need more, I would say, when our churches, are there more programs? I know of Pneuma Life Foundation is one of them. But what can be done with our clergy in this area? That there needs to be a push, because most people, when they're hurting, the church is the hospital, the emotional, spiritual hospital for healing, but yet we came to get healing, and you told me to pray and stay. That's a big issue. I don't think we talk about that, Joy.
I think as a Christian, you believe in your faith and you believe that God can heal you and change you. But there are some people who are who they are, and they're not going to change. And sometimes that's not received. There are people who abuse, and they will always be abusers. They are not going to change. So women who are in domestic violence relationships, they love their mate, possibly. And all they want is that abuse to stop. So they try to pray it away. And maybe they get counseling from church and everybody comes in together and they try to pray it away. And it may not go away, and you have to get to a place where you accept that and you walk away. Some will not. There's some research out there, and it talks about the fact that women who come from Christian households fall prey to domestic violence a lot easier sometimes than women who were raised in homes with domestic violence, simply because of our upbringing. We were raised to believe that this is the order of things. You don't leave your marriage.
And that you submit.
And you submit and you stay. And part of submission means, well, if he's a little rough with you, if he's a little harsh with you, you get pastoral counseling. But I'm here to say no. If you need to leave, you need to leave. But I also think as a community, if we're telling her she should leave, then we need to help be that buffer, because it is dangerous to leave. And if she has no place to go other than a shelter, she's not going anywhere.
Yeah. Okay, yes, we'd like to hear from you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Patricia.
Can you come closer to the mic for us? Thank you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
First of all, thank you to News 5 and the great panel. Somebody mentioned the phrase up there, we need to hear from survivors. Okay, I'm a survivor. I'm going to give this my best shot. I'm 70 years old, and my Independence Day came September 26, 1979 at 3 o'clock. The ink was dry on the papers. We even had a trial. It was nuts. But the violence started 4 days before our wedding with a slap. I was ashamed to tell anybody. I was ashamed to tell my parents. Went ahead with the wedding. 2 weeks later, it was a full-fledged beating. My aha moment came after multiple separations and multiple reconciliations, and he talked me into having a baby, and I was like, So our son was born, And he was 2 weeks old, and I was changing a diaper, and he came up behind me and started pounding on my back. I'm not doing this with a kid. What people need to understand is that fear is paralyzing. How do you act when you're so afraid to be afraid, and that's how you're living? How do you break free of that? Well, I'm here to tell everybody it's doable. It's doable. You have to have that aha moment, though. And, you know, there's something way bigger than fear, and it's freedom. It's freedom. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Hello, my name is Monica Boone. I'm with Imagine. We promote awareness about teen domestic violence. This is my niece Danielle. She was murdered by her boyfriend at 19 in 2005. One of the questions that I have is, it seems that we're talking about making a cultural change as well, because one of the things that has always disturbed me as I started working in this area is that you will still hear today, and I know that I was told this as a little girl of 5 years old, oh, if he hits you, it means he loves you. And if we stop perpetuating these myths and teaching our children that, you know, that equals love, then how can we break the cycle? And then the question I have for the panel is that there was a bill that was supposed to enforce teaching domestic violence in our schools, but from some of the conversations I've had with parents and PTO and some of the teachers, there's not really strict guidelines on what the message is. I had one parent tell me that the conversation was a pamphlet, and another parent tell me that the conversation was so disturbing that their child wanted to lock themselves in the room and didn't know what to do. How can we kind of formalize that so that we can break this cycle once and for all?
Can anyone speak to that?
There is a law for teen dating violence and trying to educate in schools, but a lot of it is demanding that our schools do that education. A lot of it is going to the schools and saying, you know that there is this law. See what you can, we want you to do something. May I also respond to one other thing? There are other options other than the criminal justice system. There is the civil justice system, where victims and survivors of domestic violence can go into court and request a protection order. And a civil protection order, while it is a piece of paper, does help reduce violence. It is effective, and it would have ordered that person that you were with out of the home, and they have to be served, and police are obligated to enforce the civil protection order as well. Again, we have comprehensive laws. They are good. They need to be enforced. And back to teaching, because we have these laws, we should demand their enforcement.
And they often don't come with funding attached to go along to make sure that the resources there to make sure that that training happens. So schools are trying to figure out how to do it with hardly any resources. So laws can be helpful in a lot of ways to set standards and expectations and have consequences for violating them, but they don't always come with exactly how it should be operationalized and what kind of resources are going to be available to make it happen.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, how you doing? My name is Annette Avery Brewer, and I'm a retired social worker right now. But I had worked about 8 years in a domestic violence shelter, and before that I was a victim. In my situation, the thing that really came to light that helped me was understanding the diversity of the systems out here and being able to get help from each one in different ways. And the most important system related to the children, because most women, they would die for them kids. So when it came to my children, one day my kids said, Mom, it's time to go. We can't take this much longer. Because we have to remember the children are there. And they're not deaf. They hear, they see. The last day I was with my husband, he had knocked me down, had me on the floor, getting ready to punch me. Now, we was in court for a divorce. And my 8-year-old son at the time had a baseball bat getting ready to knock him in his head. And I had to tell my son, don't do that, because I was afraid he would kill him or something. But I knew that at some point he'd tell us to go on upstairs. And when we went upstairs, my children said, we took a vote and it's time to go. They had taken a vote. I said, well, I got a plan and we're going to work this plan. We're going to leave today and we're going to go to a shelter. And we did it, just walking through it. But before all that, there was so many people that helped me. You know, the YWCA, great programs they had. I was involved in those programs. They knew I wasn't ready to go, but they were open, so I could go in. Used to be a Y outpost in Central, and I wasn't working at the time because I had to raise my children and take care of my husband, even though I had a degree. No matter of fact, I had 2 of them. So the thing was, the kids taught me that just because you don't think nobody knows, everybody knows.
Yes, yes.
Talk to the people around you. When I talked to my pastor, he told me, whatever help you need, we will help you. And when I left, that's exactly what they did. You know, the school, they got the kids' homework for when we was in the shelter. I had so much help around me. It meant everything in the world to me. And they showed up at court to testify in the divorce court. So that was very, very helpful. But go 20 years ahead, I had one daughter involved in a domestic violence situation. She was in another country. And I was so worried what to do. But the thing was, she already had her plan because she remembered what I did.
And see, I'm glad thank you so much for your comment, because she watched what you did. Right. And so when we're talking about children, let's talk, because we're coming up on Christmas. Children, holidays, triggers. Mm-hmm. Holidays, the children and triggers. Give us some background on when you see the highest incident of the phone calls coming in, the cases being reported, and how the holidays or drugs and alcohol play a role in all of that.
I mean, the holidays are stressful times for people. They tend to put pressure. They tend to be a time when people are all home in the house together. It can be a time when there is a lot of combustibility. Sometimes it is people don't call during the holidays because they don't want to ruin it for the kids, or they don't want it to be, you know, they want to just get through the holidays. We tend to see calls go up right after holidays too, because people have just been together, they've been trying to, you know, get through that stressful situation, and then we see calls really come up right after a holiday.
Okay, ma'am.
Hi, my name's Debbie Young, and I want to talk a little bit about loopholes in the system. January 7th, 2016, my daughter, our only child, was doing everything she could to get out of the relationship that she was in. She had signed the papers with her attorney that day to file for divorce and had a civil protection order. She was living at home with my husband and I, along with her 6-month-old twin daughters and her 2.5-year-old daughter. Her husband at that time was due to be sentenced the following morning in Medina County on domestic violence charges which had occurred in our home in front of the 2.5-year-old. 2 weeks before he murdered my daughter, he was arrested in Wayne County on rape. And some of this may sound familiar to you because Sarah Buttison, this sparked the year-long investigation into the loopholes in domestic violence because of Emily's death. But 2 weeks before he murdered her, like I stated, he was arrested in Wayne County on rape. The Wayne County prosecutor had stated, had there been a database that had information in it, that number one, he had a domestic violence charge against him and was awaiting sentencing, and number two, there was a civil protection order against him, he would not have been able to bond out at $50. That was the amount of his bail. So, January 7th, I, at that time, was working from home. I had the 2.5-year-old on my lap, and Emily had agreed that particular day to let Wally see the twins one last time because we were certain in Medina County he was going to be going to jail. He was a master manipulator like they all are. So that morning she drove to Orville, dropped the twins off. She called me on the phone when she got there and she said, "Mom, he's in the car, he won't get out." I said, "Put me on speaker." I said, "You get out of the car now or I'm calling the police." She made her way home, which from Orville to Spencer was about a 35-minute drive. When she walked in the door, she said, "When I go back and pick them up, I need somebody to go with me." The very first time ever, she said, "Mom, I'm afraid." And I said, "Honey, wait till 4:30. I'll be done with my conference calls. I'll go with you." She went in, laid down with AJ, the 2.5-year-old. At 2:30 that afternoon, she came out to the kitchen and she said, "Mom, I have to go now to pick the twins up. I just have a bad feeling." I said, "Honey, I can't go with you. I have 2 more conference calls." "All right, Mom, I'll figure out somebody to go with me." She kissed me goodbye and said, "Mom, I promise I'll be home at 5:30. And she kissed AJ goodbye. And to this day, AJ, who's now 5, remembers that day. At 5:30, good old mother's intuition kicked in, and I knew something was wrong. A little bit after 6, the phone rang, and it was Wally's aunt calling me from West Virginia. "Have you heard?" I said, "I don't know what you're talking about." And she said, "Debbie, where's your husband?" And I instantly felt my knees go weak, and I said, "He's bowling." And she just started crying. And I said, "Please tell me what happened." And she said, "Emily's been shot." Emily was trying to drive away. Her car was in drive. The 6-month-old twins were in the back seat, all buckled in. She was trying to get away. He shot her at close range. He was standing at the side of the door of one of the twins. And he shot her 4 times, and the only reason he stopped is because something went wrong with the fire mechanism of the gun. Otherwise, he would have continued to shoot. Her best friend's sister, who was 17 at the time, had accompanied her that night. And as she sat in the passenger seat and heard the shot and saw Emily slump, all she knew to do was run. And she ran screaming, pounding on doors in Orville. Nobody would let her in. They thought she was high. She continued to hear the shots, and she thought, "Oh my God, I should have gone back and got the twins." Finally, a firefighter let her in his door. When Jim and I finally got to Orville, we didn't know at that time that she had already passed. They just said, "Go to the police station." And I just remember wanting to get to the hospital to see her. We got the call came in then to the police station that she had passed, and I don't even remember what happened after then. The twins were fine. Somebody had taken them. So here I am now before you. I'm 60 years old. I had a career that I loved with Allstate Insurance. She will be gone 3 years, January 7th. And my husband and I are now raising her daughters. The twins are 3, and they're biracial, as is the 2.5-year-old. And I'm a Christian, and I know that God has a plan bigger than me. And I try really, really hard on those bad days to know that she's up there watching over us, and she's so proud of her mom and dad for keeping her baby safe. And on July 2nd of this year, when the twins turned 3, Medina County awarded us the adoption of them. We wanted to be able to keep them safe from his family. And did you know that in Ohio, if you murder someone, unless they can prove it's premeditated, you get 15 years. 15 years. He got a total of 23 because they tacked on the charges from the rape, which got reduced, and the fact that he had endangered his daughters. I have to do something to make her death worthwhile. How do we get changes made? So in the state of Ohio, and I know it can be done because they have databases in other states, why couldn't Wayne County bring up on their computer system that this man was due to be sentenced in court the next day in Medina County? Wayne and Medina County aren't that far apart. That there was a civil protection order. We had one to protect us because he had come to our home. He had slit her tires. The stories I could tell, but there has to be something that can be done. I'm at a stage now with the girls as they're older that I feel that I can finally start to get more involved, and I have to. I have to do this for Emily. I have to do it for her girls. I have to do it for my husband and I. So what do we do?
Where are we legislatively? What can the community do to get some things in place so this doesn't keep happening?
Other states have adopted and passed violent offender registries, and that is what we need to do in the state of Ohio. And what it would mean is community grassroots, talking to your legislators and letting them know, especially with the stories you've shared tonight, that this is not just for you who has lost a child, but for everyone who has gone through this. You should be talking to your legislators and demanding a violent offender registry.
A violent offender registry. So all of you who are watching via Facebook and on our website, you need to call your legislators and get a violent offenders registry. That's what we need to be loud. We need that to be very, very loud. That is the beginning of change. You can talk to your neighbors, get your churches, your community centers, start having rallies or whatever around it, but it needs to happen, and your voice can make it happen. And that's what this was all about tonight, is what she's saying. We feel so helpless, so we have to be able to do something. So you can do something. Call your legislators and get that violent offender registry.
There's another piece of legislation right now that's very, very important. It's not along those same lines, but it is strangulation legislation. Ohio is 43 other states have legislation that counts strangulation as a felony, and Ohio does not. And it's really critical in domestic violence because strangulation is a clear lethality sign that is headed toward a potential homicide. Anybody who's in a relationship, who's ever been strangled, or if you know, that's very dangerous. You're in a very dangerous situation, and we need to have laws that we can enforce strangulation.
And that bill passed the Senate, but has not passed the Ohio House. that would mean we need some calls, because they only have about a week left of this General Assembly. And if it doesn't pass, it would have to be reintroduced.
So,
which means starting all over again.
So, Alexandria, I want to be very clear, because this is information. Say it again for everyone who is watching. We need to call and ask for what? We have 1 week left. We need the phones need to fall off the hook. So say it again. For this
bill, it would be Senate Bill 207.
Senate Bill 207. Write that down. Everyone who's write down Senate Bill 207. We need that to be heard.
Right, and it would expand the domestic violence statute to allow for strangulation and suffocation to be part of that, of the statute. And if it happens more than once, that would mean that it would be a felony. So it is really important. And as Melissa said, most states have adopted some form of strangulation statute.
Is there a reason why Ohio hasn't? Is there a reason why our state hasn't?
Go ahead, Ron.
Judge Adrian?
I'll put this on him.
The attempt to get this done has spanned a lot of years. And for whatever reason, the legislature, in its infinite wisdom, has not seen fit to enact it, all evidence to the contrary, as it relates to the importance of this. You know, it's a really up-close and personal thing for you to put your hands or a ligature or your shoulder or whatever it is to someone's neck and try to cut off the air supply to their brain. It doesn't take long, and it doesn't take much pressure for that to go from an assault to a homicide.
Yeah.
And this is as close as I think we've ever gotten to getting it done. And it's really kind of curious as to what the impediment is. And I think Alexandria knows that what some of the arguments have been.
They don't want to address it because they're worried about horseplay. I'm just saying, but again, this will be the third time it's been introduced. And
so do you think, but if we have a community outcry, if they bombard their legislators, if they call, could the community make a difference in this issue?
Yes. I think yes.
Okay.
I think it's important. Yes. Because just like the sex offender, the Adam Walsh Act, that started with a simple act, the Jacob Wetterling Act in Minnesota. That family pushed and pushed and pushed, and it grew until we have the Adam Walsh Act. And every bill that's come after that is because of that. So the community does have a voice. They have a strong voice.
So you heard that. You do have a voice. You don't have to sit at home and just talking about it around your kitchen table or your living room. This is something that you can do. We're always looking for something tangible that we can do. This is something you can do. Senate Bill 207 and the Violent Offender Registry. Yes, Laura.
Hi, Danita. Thank you for having this forum. My name is Laura Cowan, community activist, domestic violence advocate, survivor of domestic violence. We need to connect the dots here. That's what we need to do. Like in 9/11, their problem is one agency did something, didn't tell the other agency, the other ones didn't say anything to the other one. We had to connect the dots. You didn't even know a lot what Judge Adrian was doing. A lot of people don't know about the shelter and the information and 911. People don't know, Alex, about the restraining orders. We had events over the Friendly Inn for protection orders. Nobody knew about anything. Somehow we have to come together, connect the dots, and get a broader understanding of word awareness to the people. Suggestion I would like to suggest is just little old me. The media is very powerful tool, can reach thousands, while us, we can just reach pockets. You look at Amanda Berry, how she did a PSA on that news station I won't mention, for the missing children. It saved a lot of people. A lot of kids were saved from that PSA. We need to do something for domestic violence the same way. A PSA, a regular announcement bringing awareness, letting them know about the shelter, the 911, and the hotline number, anything to bring awareness so the public will know what's going on.
And I will piggyback on that and say, and it needs to be a consistent message, not when murders bring our attention to it, but it needs to stay consistent. Yes, ma'am.
Good evening, and thank you for coming, and thank you for allowing us to be here. My name is Sharika Levette, and I do not consider myself a survivor of domestic violence. I consider myself a product and a bad example of being put in a system and situations continuing to happen and nothing taking place, nothing being done, nothing happening. And my perpetrator, I have a child with at this point. And my situation is so heavily layered to this point, it has turned into a domestic violence issue to now a custody issue. And I am here tonight because I need help. I don't know what to do. I don't know where to go. I don't even know what questions to ask. So I'm here because I need help. I need direction. I just need someone to talk to. I am no longer in the relationship physically, but like I said, I do have a child with the perpetrator, and now it's a custody issue, and I need help.
We're going to get you that help tonight. You came to the right place, and you're not going to leave here tonight without getting some direction and the help that you need. And this is what you're supposed to speak up and say, I need help. So you will not leave tonight without getting a one-on-one with our panelists tonight so that we can get you the help that you need. And I thank you for your courage and your transparency tonight for sharing that with us. Thank you very much. Stay after, okay? Any other questions? One more? Okay.
In terms of legislative responses, I believe the Fraser family is advocating a 11-question assessment that law enforcement would have to administer. Did you discuss that earlier?
We have not discussed that, but I am aware of that. Judge Adrian or Alexandra would like to get more into that, what the Fraser family is doing.
I know that in Ohio, there are two types of lethality assessments. One is the LAP, which talks about the 11 questions for first responders, which would be police. And I know in Cuyahoga County, in 2 of the police districts, they have the homicide prevention
domestic violence
high-risk team. And in that, they also ask questions. And again, one of the issues is, should it remain with first responders? The questions are, does he choke you? Has he ever used a weapon against you? Has he ever threatened to kill you or the children? Do you think he might try to kill you? Is he stalking you? So all of those are questions, and those things would be very, very appropriate to consider. I know that we have Tim Bainline here who is working with the high-risk team. I know Melissa knows about it as well. So we could answer some of those questions afterwards.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. My name is Phyllis Lee, and for 19 and a half years, I went through domestic violence with guns, and I related so much with different things that was said. I'm a Christian, and I related to going to church and people telling me just pray, and also not being able to have the law enforcement to back me up when I would call them, and they would tell my husband, go around the corner, cool off, and come back. And I had 7 children, and me and my 7 children, when he came back, then he took it out on us because I did call the police. And I got a restraining order. I called the police, and they said, he owns this house just like you do, and so I can't put him out. I'm just going to tell him that he has to go leave the house, and cool off a little bit, and then come back. And I went through with that for 19 and a half years. And I do say that God is in the picture a lot, because with me and my children prayed constantly. And God gave me, I was sick, and God gave me a wonderful doctor. She did everything she could to help me. She got me a social worker, excuse me, that helped me so much and helped my children. Sent someone into my house to help take care of my children while I was sick. And she talked to me about alcoholism and how we had to do different things to be able to survive. She saw that I had the money to take care of myself. And so it was so many different things that was good while I was going through with it. But then it was things that wasn't good as far as the protection and everything. And my neighbor did know what was going on, and thank God she did, because my husband one day had a shotgun, and my children was in the bathroom, and he had the shotgun ready to shoot them, and she called the police because she saw it out the window. And that saved my children from getting killed. And so I know it's very important to let people know what you're going through with. But I say today that I believe if all those things hadn't worked out for me, we wouldn't be here today.
We thank you. Thank you very much. I believe we're about to bring this to a close. First of all, I want to thank all of you for being here today, physically present. We appreciate your voices. I want to thank everyone who's been watching on Facebook and on our website, news5cleveland.com. Before we sign off, we want you to know we have a page on our website filled with resources that you can reach out to right now. Go to news5cleveland.com/voices for change. This page will stay up. It's everything you need to know. We have a page that has information on every panelist that you see here. If you have more questions or you don't know who to turn to, we have a page with our panelists' names and their bios. And if there's something else you need to know, you can reach out. We also want you to know that News 5 has made it a part of our mission to make Cleveland a better land. We've been on the forefront of the protection orders and the high-risk areas. We've been doing our part in trying to educate and inform you about this issue. Can we do better? Of course, all of us can always do better. This forum is a part of that, and I can tell you that our station will continue to be committed to inform you, to let you know about legislation, not just to bring you victim stories and families who have lost their loved ones, but now I hope we can do a story that says that Senate Bill 207 passed. That's the next story that I hope that we will be able to report, that we have that in Ohio. I hope that we can report that there's a violent offender registry in Ohio. That's the kind of news that I hope that we can start reporting. Today, Domestic Violence Voices for Change is public forum. We hope that it informed you. I believe if you know better, you can do better. Hopefully you got some information that you didn't know about. I received information that I didn't know about. But the most important thing is the challenge that we're going to leave you with. If you see something, say something. We cannot be a society that we see things and we don't say anything about what's happening in our neighbor's home. We just want to be silent. There's something wrong. Say it. If you see a family member or a friend, you're noticing a behavior change, say something. Speak up. Be that voice of change that we need right now. This is very serious. And if we don't say something, nothing will be done. And that is a guarantee. Again, if you are watching us right now, a number you can call is 216-391-HELP. 216-391-HELP. You are not alone. There is a way out. You heard the testimonies today. There is life on the other side. This isn't the end of your story. It doesn't have to be. There's someone who can help you. Nationally, 1-800-799-7233. Again, it's time for the community to come together, get the grassroots thing moving, and let's be loud about domestic violence, not just for today, not just in public forums, but in your home.
in your home. Start talking to your boys and start talking to your young ladies in your home. It's not right for a boy to hit you. Young ladies, you are to feel safe. You are to be valued. You are to be treasured. You should feel that way. You never let anyone violate you, not just physically, but also we talked about emotional abuse, things that words can hurt, words can damage you, controlling you. It's not healthy. It's not right. We have to start at home. Parents, the challenges are for you. Grandparents who are raising your grandchildren, it's challenges on you to plant these seeds in our young people right now so that they don't grow up into being victims and abusers. The cycle has to stop. We have to start somewhere. Again, I thank my station, News 5, for agreeing to do a forum like this. It was something that I wanted to do. Aisha Frazier's murder, it triggered something in the community. And I just felt personally that we needed something like this because you were feeling helpless. You were feeling like you didn't know things. You don't know what to do. But you're tired of feeling the way you're feeling. And you're tired of being frustrated. And you're tired of loopholes in the system. You're tired of feeling like you live in a country where the system does not work for you. Well, let's make the system work for us by educating ourselves and speaking up and unifying together to make a difference. This is a serious, complex issue, but I believe if we work at it and if we speak up, that we really can see change. We're not where we used to be, but we're definitely not where we could be here in Ohio. So your voice will make a difference tonight. I hope you got something from this forum. I hope this wasn't time wasted because you really got some really good information tonight and your voices are being heard. And that's what we wanted. We wanted you to know as a news station, we hear your stories. We don't just report about it. Tonight, we want to do something about it. My name is Danita Harris, and I thank you again for watching Domestic Violence, Voices for Change, and I thank you for tonight being a part of that change. Good night.